right, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, citizens of YouTube. This is Pastor Dowell, and this is
Lies.
all right. Hey, we are in here for a second. Y'all know that I've always talked about how I've had a young man who's actually grew up here on the community ever since he was knee high to a snake shadow. Well, he's a grown young man now, and we're in here talking about this false doctrine of people trying to practice the replacement theology, or actually calling themselves the actual bloodline descendants of the Hebrew Israelites, when in truth is that they've had nothing to do with it whatsoever at all. The problem and the issue that we're having today is this, is that you have these Gentiles, these people of another nation, they are coming in to Israel, that's what they say, and want to be grafted in, but they will not be taught by a bloodline descended Hebrew Israelite, and they just assume that they can actually take the Bible and then take their citizenship, nationhood of America and the European culture and place it and infuse it into the Hebrew Bible, and then just totally do away with the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And see, and this is the problem today, and the reason why that the Christians, the Messianics, and all these other different sects and groups out there, especially these false, well, they are Jews, but they're not Hebrews and they're not Israelites over here in the country called Israel. So we have a very serious problem, because now you've got Gentiles trying to teach our people, our culture, our laws, our statutes, and commandments, and this is a problem. This is a major problem, and that's the reason why you don't ever see these people living set apart. That's the reason why you often see them infused in forms of Christianity in with our doctrine and stuff. So myself and Elias is going to come on here just for a moment, and we're going to speak to you about some of the issues, the troubles, and the problems that are going on. And many of you need to hear from Elias too, so you can hear and see that he's a scholar in his own right, because he does a lot of study. And he's going to address a lot of these issues as well, because you see, if we don't address these falsehoods, that's the reason why many of you will continue to look like the nations. That's the reason why many of you will continue to justify, women wearing makeup and going without head coverings and wearing tight pants and men wearing skinny jeans and earrings in your ears and nose and all this other junk. And it's because you learned this behavior from the nations. Now, while I do not discriminate anyone coming into Israel from another nation and stuff, that does not make you a priest. And that definitely does not make you a preacher or a teacher of this particular doctrine, because we're talking about a Hebraic culture here. We're not talking about a European culture. And a lot of people get it all mixed up, and they get it mixed up real, real bad. And that's the reason why we see this deception today. So far, Elias, what said you to what I've said so far? And speak up very loud.
Well, yes, sir. There's definitely an issue. If you notice that all of your Messianic communities, or whatever you want to say, people that are from another nation, when they try to teach the scriptures, even though they know the truth in certain areas, they will never touch stuff like Deuteronomy 28, Leviticus 26. And you'll never see them, or they'll skip over it, or they won't focus on, they'll say, we don't need to, focus on the natural bloodline. But according to the scriptures, then, the natural bloodline is still important, because, that's what Paul said. But, so in a way, I still see it as racism. Because these people are still, even though they supposedly, they've been grafted in, as they like to claim, and they've taken the God of Israel, but what they're still holding on is they're still holding on to the European doctrines, and they're still trying to interpret the word through their version of a Hebrew concept, and they're not taking it through the true Hebrew, simply because it's impossible for them to do it, because they're not the true Hebrews.
And that's the deception today with them practicing what I've said over and over and over again, this collusion. Let me break it down for you. You see, if you get the people of the book wrong, then you will actually be taught wrong. You would actually have a false representation, because the truth is, Yah has not cast off his people that he has foreknew. And when Peter, Shimon Kepler, as well as the emissary Saul, when they spoke on these matters right here, they clearly wrote to the tribes of Israel. So while people are trying to diminish the natural seed and the natural branch from all this, the book doesn't. The book doesn't exclude it at all. And this is the problem. This is a very serious problem. And that's the reason why you have all this false doctrine, this false teaching out there, because you've got people who have been so-called, quote unquote, check this out, grafted in. Now, what Elias was saying earlier, you got these grafted in people holding on to that Gentile mentality, that Gentile preaching, that Gentile teaching, and then using their doctrine, finding a few scriptures to support their doctrine, and they are very good in their doctrine, but it's a false doctrine, and it's a false teaching because it's done very underminingly. You're not going to sit up there and do away with the natural seed and a natural branch. See, the bottom line is this, and I know in this country that we've been coerced, manipulated, and deceived when we hear certain words. You see, the truth is that Christ was not a white man. And the truth is, ancient Israelites were definitely not white people. They were just not. That may be a painful truth for a lot of you Europeans to swallow, but it is the truth. And so when you see Moses hiding off into Egypt, he didn't hide off into a white country. It was a black country. Egypt was. And when you see the hieroglyphics, when you see the black people on the wall, you didn't see white slaves sitting over there with no shirts off in the middle of the desert, building pyramids or building houses or turning straw and mud into bricks and rocks and everything else. You didn't see that. And you still don't see that today. So the white people today, they want to continue to practice replacement theology by saying that, they are gone, the natural branch, and it doesn't make any difference whatsoever at all about the natural seed. What do you say about that, Elias?
I'd say they're in great error, and they're leading a lot of people off, because the card hold facts is that there is no salvation available to the other nations if they do not hold, and they're not going and taking the skirt of a true Hebrew. When you go over to the book of Revelations, you'll see that the city, New Jerusalem, only has 12 gates, which are named after the 12 tribes of Israel, and that all the representatives that are going to be representing these nations go to children of Israel, and then they go to the Most High Yah. So there's always going to be an order, and there's always going to be like a caste system, according to the scripture. And when you try to, you get rid of the natural seed of Israel, you're really getting rid of your own salvation.
That's true, because if you try to circumvent the actual people by practicing replacement theology and then infusing, inserting yourself, and then not actually doing what Elias had stated earlier, there's going to come a day when there's going to be the time that they are going to take the skirt of him that is an Israelite, not a Jew. You're not going to take the skirt of these Ashkenazims over here, these people who practice satanic worship through the Kabbalah and the Mishmah and the Talmud. And they ain't them. They are not the people of the book, because Christ, after the resurrection, told us exactly who these people were. You see, in your translation, it says Jews, but it really translated, I know them who say that they are Yehudims, but they are not. But they are the synagogue of Satan. I know them who say that they are Yehudims, but they are liars. And that's just a fact. And these people are not. You cannot take the seed of Japhet, turn around and just because he places himself in the tents of Shem, just like Bereshit says in the 9th chapter, all of a sudden you the called and chosen people. It ain't it. Because Christ said he has not been sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. As a matter of fact, he even told the disciples, don't even go into the way of the Goyim. Don't even enter into the streets of the Samaritans or the mixed breeds, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. See, Christianity is a drug that's done screwed all you people up. And then when you start embracing what they call Hebrew roots, Hebrew cultures, what you're really doing is bringing over your culture and fusing it in with our culture. Isn't that right? Yes, sir. And then they're rewriting the whole entire book, because the truth is, and I'll say it again, y'all ain't cast off his people which he's foreknew, whether you like it or not. And see, this is the problem today. Because when you reject Yah's people, you reject him. Can you imagine trying to get salvation and getting filled with the Holy Spirit at that time if people reject Peter?
That ain't happening.
That ain't happening. If they reject Paul. You see what I mean? If they reject the seed, this is the problem today. It's called manipulation. And now you got, and believe me, I don't have any trouble with Europeans teaching my culture, my heritage, and my nationality. No problem whatsoever at all, as long as they learned it from an Israelite. Because you're not going to sit up here, read this book, and think you're going to come to this knowledge for yourself, because you're not. You know what I mean? So the truth is, you reject Yah's people, you reject Yah himself. Because how else are you going to be taught the real, true doctrine of this? That's the problem today. What said you, Elias?
Yeah, that's a good point you made about if you reject the Most High Yah's people, you're rejecting the Most High himself. It's the same way that the same people that reject the Hamashiach or Christ, and then they think that they're going to be able to still speak to the Father. Whenever you go to the Old Testament alone, you see always there was a mediator. And we know Christ is our mediator was the same thing. The mediator for the other nations to join to the Most High Yah and his people is the children of Israel. So if you avoid the children of Israel, you have no mediator, and the Most High Yah is going to say that he doesn't know you. And if you even look at the message, the gospel of the message was always preached, like he said before, to the Israelites. Its goal was never for the other nations. The other nations can come and they can hear it because whoever hears the voice, they can go to the shepherd. But the goal of the message is for Israel to come back to the Most High Yah. And you can go over to the book of Ezekiel, and it tells you about the two sticks coming back together. So
Which,
if
you listen to the Europeans trying to explain this, they're going to twist it. And that's the reason why they avoid the color issue. Because the truth is when you really, truly define Israel according to what the Bible says, Solomon, black and comely, Jesus, feet like burnt brass in a fire, hair like wool, white like wool. Ancients of the day. Moses takes his black hand, sticks it inside of his cloak, and then it comes out white. That was a miracle. That was a miracle that the book says in itself in Shemot, that if they did not believe the sign of the first miracle, when Moshe took his staff and threw it down on the ground, it turned into a serpent. They said they will believe this sign. It is no miracle for a white man to take his hand and stick it into his bosom and it come out white again. That's no miracle whatsoever at all. And so, the problem today is, and I know according to the way you've been tricked and manipulated, that I sound like that I'm racist to you. That's utterly amazing. This reverse psychology that they put on you. So now we got all these false teachers. We got false preachers. We got false doctrines. We even got false Hebrews. We even got false brethren that are sitting here today that are trying to teach you what it means to be grafted in. And they don't know what the hell grafted in means. They have no idea. When you're grafted in, that means you are grafted into the original branch. Is that right? You're grafted into the original, and then you become part of it. You don't turn around and be separate and say that the other people are cast off, and then they're coming in, and now you're going to teach them because y'all has thrown them away. No. That's false doctrine. That's false theology, and it just simply ain't going to fly. Well, the bottom line is Christ didn't come but for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And it wasn't until later on that when you get people such as Timothy, whose father was a Greek, that actually ends up coming into this thing. He didn't go around and teach Greek doctrine. He didn't go around and teach like the people do today, Christianity, laced with a little bit of Hebrewism, and then mixed with a little bit of Messianic, and then mixed with a little bit of idolatry, and then placing all these other signs and symbols in front of it, and then calling it Israel. See, that's the confusion of today. But again, you can't expect the people that has actually been evil, and been perpetuating terrorism and occupation all across this land and throughout this earth to ever represent the truth for you and to you. You're not going to get the truth from J. Vernon McGee. You're definitely going to get the truth from Chuck Mitzler. You're not going to get the truth from all these other people because they want to skip over Yah's people. They want to bypass Yah's people, and then they want to practice their replacement theology, include and put themselves in it, while they exclude the real, true bloodline descendants of Israel. What saith you?
Yeah, that's basically it. That's the truth. And like I said, if you go and you just read the scriptures for yourself, and without your Christian pastor telling you, and you'll see that the scriptures is always in the Torah is a book for the Israelites. Mm-hmm. All the laws, even like the strangers, people try to say in the Old Testament they were equal, you could say. Or they obeyed the same laws, but there were laws that they could do that Israelites couldn't do. Mm-hmm. Such as you could not eat, as a natural-born Israelite, a dead animal, but you could give it to the stranger.
That's a little bit too much for them. You understand what I mean? For instance, Rahab and Rahab. All right? Explain to them the mixture but that they mix up commonly in this doctrine today when they're supposed to be talking about so-called Rahab the harlot.
Well, people like to use Rahab the harlot because they try to say, well, she's an example of someone from another nation who has married into, and he's actually part of the bloodline of the Hamashiach. Which there is other nations that can come and they join themselves to the house of Israel. That's
sure they can.
The scripture.
Yeshayahu says that as well.
Yes, in Isaiah 56.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but
we can give you a name.
The problem with the use of Rahab is people don't even want to go into the scriptures no more and actually look and actually find legit examples. They just kind of like pick the first one that the Christian pastor teaches them. But they tell you Rahab married into the bloodline of Christ, but just accurately adding up the date, she would be around about 300 years old in order to marry Boaz's father.
And people wasn't living that long then. They wasn't living that long then because we're after the flood when the actual age of man began to descend.
And in 20 years.
Yeah, and I tell you, it's when we start talking about things like this, it's nothing but confusion to a lot of people because, what do you think it is, Elias? What do you think it is that the reason why when people hear us talking like this, that the first thing they try to use as their trump card is they want to try to accuse us of being racist?
Well, I'll give a perfect analogy. It's the same thing with the Jews. They've been put all this upon all the nations. They started World War I. They started World War II. They've done all this to the Germans alone, and then the rest of the people, they were the ones that funded the slave trade and the conquest of the Americas. They went through all this, and they're the ones guilty of doing all this. And then now they fake the identity of someone else, put the other people in bondage, and take their identity. And then whenever you say anything to questions, such as questions like, was there really any gas chambers? Or did they make that story up?
Now, Anti-Defamation League.
Now you're anti-Semitic. And they even have it in their documents. They said, we're going to create something, and we're going to get to the point now where all we have to say is anti-Semitism. One word. And then it's actually a law in majority of European countries. You will go to jail for just saying that, is there really any gas chambers? So it's the same thing. It's just all the guilt and the condemnation of themselves. So they're just trying to... They put it basically, anytime you want to talk about the truth, they label it racism.
Let's end this video going back over here to Bereshit, the 10th chapter. And let's go over here and see exactly what it says, because that's the one thing that I also noticed that the other nations never want to do, is they never want to go back to the beginning. They never want to deal with the Table of Nations, because the Table of Nations actually identify who's seeded what and where you come from.
That's true.
Because you got people today hollering anti-Shemitic, or they say anti-Semitic, but they're not Shemitic because they of the seed of Japhet.
That's true.
And if you're of the seed of Japhet, it clearly tells you in Bereshit 10:5, meaning Genesis, the 10th chapter, the 5th verse, that these are the Gentiles. These are the Goyim. And when you look at Ashkenaz, you see that he is a descendant of Japhet. So how in the world can Japhet from the Caucasus Mountains be a Shemitic or be from the line of Shem, when it clearly tells you in the Table of Nations that he didn't come from Shem? He come from the seed of Japhet, which is the Goyim.
That's true.
Also Yawan, which is the Greeks. All of them come from and they descend from the line of Japhet. Now, when you're looking at somebody that's a Shemite, you're looking at somebody that's of the 12 tribes of Israel. And then there are other people that are Shemites, that are even not of the 12 tribes of Israel. But then you go on down to Eber, then you go to Abraham, and then this is where it all starts to come in. So now they're trying to tell you today that, okay, in order for you to be an Israelite today and you can be grafted in, it makes no difference as long as you receive the faith of Abraham, be you Jew or Greek, bond or free, male or female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. What do you say to that, Elias?
Well, I'll say first and foremost, the majority of the case, and I believe personally from my studies in the example of that scripture, there is now no difference between the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Israel, because now they're going to become one. And that was
you starting something. You know that, don't you? Go ahead.
But that was basically a little bit of an image, but not so much what it was, but like a projection of the two sticks in Ezekiel. They're going to become one once again. So when it comes down to it, they've lied. These other nations, they've lied. People didn't study their history because there wasn't much knowledge available to people at that time because the majority of people were illiterate. But now, like the Most High Yah says, the knowledge has been increased, and people, the jig is up. The word, basically, the cat's out the bag. It's over. Everybody knows who the true Hebrew Israelites are. Now, whether they want to sit there and they want to avoid it, try to throw it, and cover it up, because that's basically all they can do. They can't stop the movement. It's the Most High Yah. You ain't going to stop it. So the best thing you can do is try to get people distracted. And the best thing they're going to do is just keep trying to label it racism.
Or either line up with it and come along with the blessings when the Most High come along. You see, the problem is that today when people read the word, they don't know the history of Hellenization.
That's true.
And they don't understand that, the 10 tribes of Israel, they never returned back to the land of Yehuda, back to the land of Judah, back to the land of commonly called Palestine today. They never returned. So they were absorbed into the kingdom of the Greeks. Mm-hmm. And so when he says, go not into the way of the Gentiles, all right, first he's dealing with the tribes of Judah first, but when he turned around and commissioned, and he sent the emissary to Saul, to go out and say, henceforth I'm sent forth to the Gentiles because you count yourself unworthy. You didn't want to receive this. Who was he going to? He was going to a people that was influenced by Hellenization, kind of like my people been influenced by American Europeanism here in this country. We've set up here and assimilated in this country. We've lost our language. We lost our names. We lost our culture. We lost our nationality. We lost all the influence and even lost our worship to the Most High Yah. So when you see Paul and you see Peter and you see all them, man, who are these unknown gods that you fooling around with? Mm-hmm. You ignorantly worship. Let me declare to you who the real one is. And so when Paul went up to these Greek providences, he went up there to the people who was influenced by Hellenization. He went to get the lost sheep of the house of Israel. That's the truth. And that's the truth straight way. But you ain't going to hear the Messianics and none of them say that because, after all, James to the 12 tribes of Israel, greetings. Peter, 12 tribes of Israel, greetings. You understand what I mean? And they don't get this because they're not understanding that the Israelites went and intermingled, mixed themselves and absorbed themselves into Greek providences, Roman providences. And these are the people, along with the people who they're intermingled with and married with. That's the reason why you will see in the renewed covenant some people of another nationality mixing with them, such as the one they hate, we use in the most more than anything, is Timothy, whose father was a what?
Greek.
A Greek. People hate that. The bottom line is that America would call it miscegenation, but the truth is that's what was taking place. And then Timothy, he ended up being a Israelite grafted in because his mother was a Yehudim, because he accepted the laws and statutes and commandments. But key point right here, he was taught by a bloodline descendant. That's what people are missing today. And they don't want to humble themselves. But you're going to humble yourself. Because he said, I'm going to make them come and bow down at your feet to know that I have loved you. What said you, Elias?
And I'll pretty much say everything that is in the scriptures in the end has always been prophesied from the beginning. And you always are going to go and you see anything that has been said has always come to pass or is fixing to come to pass. Mm-hmm. And the prophecy is that the tent of Judah would be saved first, so that the other tribes don't boast themselves against them, because the scepter is supposed to be with Judah. Mm-hmm. So that is the reason why he said to go to Judah first, is because it has to fit that prophecy that Judah would arise first and bring the message to the rest of the tribes, and then the tribes would go give it to the other nations if they, came and accepted the laws of the Most High Yah and joined themselves to the house of Israel. And another important thing to back up what I said before about how the representatives of the mediator between the Most High Yah and Israel is Christ. Mm-hmm. But the mediator between Christ and the other nations and the Most High Yah is Israel, because you have to have Israel. You can't throw them out of the equation. Israel has to be there because you have to be able to go to a Hebrew and hold their skirt. You can't just throw yourself out of the equation and throw them out of the equation and appear yourself. And if you go to the book of Isaiah, it tells you that there's going to be many nations that are going to join to the house of Israel, mm-hmm. and people don't want to read the next couple verses, because 2 verses down says, and the children of Israel shall inhabit them and possess them for servants and for bondmen and for bondwomen, etc. And it says, and they're going to lead into captivity whose captives they were. So there's always going to be a caste system. It's just the way it is.
Well, the bottom line is, the prophet Joel, as well as the prophet Obadiah, they speak to this. They speak to this,
Hosea.
that whether you people, Hosea speaks to this too. Y'all, there's going to be a lot of y'all just going to flat out going to be servants to the bloodline descendants of Israel. I know it's a hard pill for you to swallow. It's a very hard pill for you to swallow. But hey, we can go on all day long talking about this, all day long. But you know what's amazing to me? You've got Israel, this little bitty tribe, all right? These little bitty people that end up going into Mizraim. And they come out this great nation. Now all of a sudden, every nation on the earth is Israel. Now everybody is so-called born again, they Israel. You know what's amazing? And then when you, and look at, was not Israel always under curses for disobedience?
Oh.
I mean, captivity of Egypt, captivity of the Assyrians, the captivity of the Babylonians, the captivity of the Medes and Persians. All right, watch this. The captivity of the Greeks and the Romans, the trans-Sahara slave trade with the Arabs, and then the transatlantic slave trade with the Jews and the Europeans. Isn't that amazing?
Yes, sir.
So you got all these different captivities going on here, all these different captivities that are going on here, and yet and still, Christ told us that matter of fact, the scribes and Pharisees made a quote to Christ over in the book of Johanna, the 8th chapter. We never have been into bondage to any man.
Key point.
Very key point. You mean to tell me you Ashkenazi Jews today have never been into bondage to any man? And you calling yourself children of the king? This can't be so. This can't be so, because I just got finished laying down the history of our people. 200-something thousand of our people went into the Assyrian captivity, never returned. 14,500 of our people went into the Babylonian captivity. And then the Edomites, along with the Hittites, the Canaanites, the Moabites, the Jebusites, and the Hivites, and all the rest of these people squatted in our land.
That's true.
Because the kingdoms didn't want no dumb Israelites up there in their providences. And that's why you see Daniel in a high office. Shadrach, Meshach, and that bad Negro. You see all these people. They didn't take the dumb Israelites. They left the lowest, dumb, base-minded people to be vine dressers. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
But see, this is the trouble today. You ain't never heard this, and you ain't going to hear this, because a European is not going to teach you this, because it's entirely too painful, because they know that they're not included in this unless they actually hear it from an Israelite. That's the truth. And that's the true straight way. It's painful. I know it hurts. It's like a swift kick in the gut. He that have ears to hear, let him hear. That's probably the reason why these people ain't casting out no devils. Probably the reason why they ain't got no power to heal the sick. That's probably the reason why they don't live set apart either. They still function after the mind of the nations rather than the mind of the set apart Israelites. Because we see that all throughout the scriptures, from the beginning to the end, Yah has always told us to come out. Always told us to be separate. Always told. Why? So we know that we can live on a little piece of land as little sanctuaries to where his laws and statutes and commandments can be exalted. That's just the truth. What say you, Elias? I'll give you the last word and I'll close it out.
Dealing with the many nations that try to claim the title and the people and the heritage of Israel, because one thing that everybody doesn't understand for some reason. 2 points I'm going to make. First thing is in the book of Deuteronomy, it tells you that these curses that are going to be upon this children of Israel, this is going to be a sign upon them forever, throughout all their generations. So when you look throughout all the world history and you see the curses, these curses particularly being upon a certain people, then that tells you who the children of Israel is. And if you look at the Jews, you look at all these other people that are claiming to be the people of the Most High, yeah, they don't have the curses on them. And the second point I would make would be, because we know that Israel is the name that was given to the patriarch Jacob, which means prince with the Most High Yah. But the key point is that the 12 sons of Jacob were called Israelites. But here's the thing that people don't miss, is that Israel is not a religion. Israel is a people. So every Israelite is a Hebrew, but not every Hebrew is an Israelite. And that's about it.
That's a good point. That's little Elias. He grew up here on the land, you know, living set apart with us all these many years. And many of you don't know his face. But this is the one I've been telling y'all for years to come that I said, I got a young man when he was 16, 15, 16, 17. You're 18 now, right?
Yes, sir.
18 years old. That I put up against any of you seminary teachers, preachers, scholars, messianics, Hebrew roots, whoever you want to be. I mean, I won't even come. I'll send him. I'll send him, and I'll sit back at home and just let the smoke come up when it all gets done, and let me know when it's clear, and we'll come pick you up. Because I'm telling you, you people are not ready. You can't handle the truth. You just heard the truth, and it's the truth straight way. That is all there is to it. We're going to get back to building this what's this thing again?
It's like a
ceiling stand?
Yeah, it's a stand for plants, I guess.
Yeah, well, we got to go down here and get with Sister Vicky, who's an Israelite as well. We're going to get with her, and we're going to see if she can give us a little bit more ideas of what she may like to go on in here, because, you know, we try to make the yoke easy and the burden light here. All right. Shalom.
Shalom.
The king is coming. Hope you've been edified and exhorted in some way, somehow. Glory to the king. Receive ye the Ruach HaKodesh.